The town of Redstone had always been a quiet settlement, tucked between rolling plains and the jagged cliffs of the western horizon. Its wooden boardwalks creaked under the weight of daily life, and dust swirled endlessly in the streets, carried by the relentless wind. Yet, even in this sleepy town, secrets had a way of creeping into the corners where no one looked. Clara Whitmore had been part of Redstone for nearly 5 years, ever since she'd arrived from a small town further east. Her soft brown hair was usually pulled back neatly, and her hazel eyes, though warm, often held a distant sadness. She worked at the general store, arranging goods on creaking shelves, but the real burden she carried was far heavier than sacks of flour or stacks of tin cans. For months, Clara had been hiding a letter. It wasn't just any letter. It was written by her late father, a man who had been a respected figure in a distant town and who had mysteriously passed away just a few years before her arrival in Redstone. The letter was said to contain information that could alter the course of lives, revealing truths about the town, certain influential families, and even a crime long buried beneath polite smiles and friendly nods. Every night, after the store closed and the town fell silent, Clara would sit by the small wooden table in her modest cabin. The letter lay before her, folded neatly, sealed with wax bearing her father's crest. Her hands would tremble slightly whenever she touched it. She had spent countless evenings reading it, each time convincing herself to burn it, yet each time unable to part with it. What if the truth was too heavy for the people of Redstone? Or worse, what if it brought danger to her own doorstep? Meanwhile, the sheriff of Redstone, a man named Jonah Carter, was a figure both feared and respected. Jonah had been born and raised in this town, riding the dusty streets long before Clara had arrived. His broad shoulders and steady gaze gave him the air of authority, yet there was a gentleness beneath the surface. He had a keen sense of justice, and his instincts rarely failed him. Over the years, he had seen many things: thefts, disputes, even a murder, and had always carried the weight of responsibility without complaint. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the boardwalks, Clara noticed Jonah lingering outside the store. His presence always made her uneasy, though not because of fear. There was a curiosity in his eyes, a way he observed people that made it impossible to hide anything for long. Clara's pulse quickened. She had kept the letter hidden, but she knew that one day, it might no longer be hers to control. Inside her cabin, the fire crackled softly. She sat on the edge of her chair, staring at the envelope. Not yet, she whispered to herself. The words were almost a prayer, almost a plea. She wasn't ready, and yet, a sense of inevitability pressed against her chest. Secrets, she had learned, had a way of demanding to be known, whether one was ready or not. Little did Clara know, the moment she would be forced to reveal the letter was approaching faster than she could imagine. And when that day came, Sheriff Jonah Carter would be at the heart of it, reading words that could change everything he thought he knew about the people around him, and about Clara herself. The evening air in Redstone carried a chill, the kind that seeped into bones and made even the bravest cowboy pull his coat tighter. The town's lampposts flickered faintly as shadows stretched across the wooden sidewalks. Clara Whitmore sat at her small table, staring at the sealed letter her father had left behind. Despite her attempts to ignore it, the weight of its contents pressed heavily on her heart. She could not help but wonder if she was truly ready to confront what it revealed. As she contemplated, a new presence stirred in the town. A rider had arrived just beyond the outskirts, silhouetted by the fading orange glow of the setting sun. He was tall, cloaked in dust-streaked leather, and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years on horseback. His horse, a sleek bay mare, snorted softly and stamped the dirt with restless hooves. The stranger's arrival caused a ripple of curiosity among the townsfolk. Whispers spread along the boardwalks, eyes peering out of windows, as shopkeepers paused to watch him dismount and lead his horse toward the town's inn. Clara, observing from her window, felt a strange tension coil in her chest. She did not know why, but something about this stranger unsettled her. Perhaps it was his quiet demeanor, or perhaps it was the instinctive sense that strangers often brought more than just their own stories into a small town. She quickly turned away, reminding herself that she had more pressing concerns: the letter. Sheriff Jonah Carter, meanwhile, was taking his usual evening patrol through Redstone. His boots scuffed against the boards as he moved, eyes scanning the streets for any sign of trouble. He noticed the newcomer immediately. Something about him felt different. The sheriff's instincts told him to keep a careful watch. Redstone had seen its share of outlaws and troublemakers, but this man seemed to carry a calm purpose rather than chaos. Jonah's curiosity was piqued. As night fell, the town quieted further. Clara sat by the fireplace, the letter before her, her fingers tracing the edges of the envelope. She remembered her father's words. "The truth may frighten you, but it will always find its way." She shivered. Could she protect the people she cared about if the letter's contents came to light? Could she protect herself? A knock on her door startled her. She jumped, heart hammering, and cautiously approached. No one was there, only the faint crunch of boots on dirt outside her cabin reached her ears. She stepped to the window and glimpsed the silhouette of the stranger walking toward the inn, his presence calm but undeniably powerful. At the same time, Sheriff Jonah paused outside the general store. He had sensed the tension in Clara's movements whenever he had passed by earlier that day. Something was hidden, something important, and though he did not yet know the details, he felt an unshakable pull toward uncovering the truth. The night deepened, and Redstone slept under a blanket of stars. Yet in Clara's cabin, the letter waited, its secrets whispering softly to her. She knew that sooner or later, she would have to confront the truth her father had entrusted to her. And when that moment arrived, the paths of 3 lives, her own, the sheriff's, and the stranger's, would collide in ways she could not yet imagine. Clara lit a candle, her hand shaking slightly. The shadows danced across the walls of her cabin as if anticipating what was to come. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Not yet, not tonight." But deep down, she knew that the calm before the storm could not last forever. The following morning, Redstone awoke to the harsh glare of the rising sun. Dust swirled along the boardwalks, settling over the wooden shutters of the general store and the signs hanging from swinging posts. Clara Whitmore moved with quiet efficiency, arranging barrels and stacking sacks of flour, though her mind was elsewhere. The letter, tucked safely in the bottom drawer of her writing desk, weighed heavily on her thoughts. Every creak of the floorboards outside made her startle. Every shadow cast by the rising sun seemed to conceal a secret she was not yet ready to reveal. Sheriff Jonah Carter rode into town that morning, his boots steady in the stirrups and his hat pulled low against the sun. He had noticed small discrepancies in the town over the past week, missing deliveries, whispers behind closed doors, and Clara's nervous glances when she thought no one was watching. He respected the townsfolk, yes, but he had learned long ago that appearances in Redstone could be deceiving. People hid things, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of necessity. And now, he had a suspicion that Clara Whitmore, kind and reserved as she appeared, was holding something significant. Jonah dismounted and tied his horse to the post outside the general store, his keen eyes scanning the street. Clara looked up as he entered, offering a polite, though distracted, smile. He nodded at her, and she felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Jonah's gaze lingered longer than usual, as though he could peer past her calm exterior and see into the depths of her secrets. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice even, betraying none of his inner curiosity. "Busy today?" Clara nodded, keeping her hands busy with a stack of canned goods. "As always, Sheriff. Seems the town never sleeps." Her smile was polite, but her mind raced. She wondered if he suspected the truth about the letter. How much did he know? Did he understand what she carried, or was it merely a sense that something was off? Jonah's gaze drifted to the window, where the stranger from the previous night had been seen entering the inn. "I noticed a new face in town," he said casually, though his hand brushed against the grip of his revolver. "Riders come in from the east. Haven't heard his story yet. You seen him?" Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted the goods on the counter. "I caught a glimpse of him last night. Seems quiet enough." She hesitated, forcing herself to appear nonchalant. She could not let him know that her attention to this stranger carried a personal significance she did not yet understand. Jonah's intuition, however, would not allow him to drop the matter. He had spent years in law enforcement, tracking outlaws and uncovering hidden truths. Something about Clara's manner suggested she knew more than she let on, and he had learned long ago that in Redstone, silence often spoke louder than words. Meanwhile, the stranger lingered in the town's inn, his presence quiet but deliberate. He observed the comings and goings of Redstone with a patient eye, as though measuring the town and its people against an invisible scale. He had heard whispers of Clara Whitmore and the letter she carried, though not its contents. Yet even from a distance, he sensed the tension that clung to her, a tension that seemed to ripple outward, touching everything in the town, including the sheriff. By mid-afternoon, Jonah had returned to the sheriff's office, reviewing records and old correspondence. He found inconsistencies that troubled him, gaps in information that could not be ignored. He knew that sooner or later, the truth would surface, and when it did, it would involve Clara. The question was not if, but when, and whether she would trust him enough to reveal her secret before it was too late. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting Redstone in shades of gold and shadow, Clara returned to her cabin, the letter still hidden in its drawer. She could sense the approaching storm, the invisible threads drawing her, the sheriff, and the stranger together. She whispered softly to herself, "Soon, but not yet." And yet, even as she spoke the words, she felt the inevitable tightening around her secret, as though the letter itself had begun to stir. The next morning, Redstone awoke to the distant clatter of wagon wheels and the low hum of voices carrying across the dusty streets. Clara Whitmore moved carefully through her morning routine, dusting shelves and arranging goods, though her thoughts were elsewhere. The letter remained hidden in the bottom drawer of her desk, its presence like a constant shadow at her side. She had resolved not to open it again today, but the urge tugged at her relentlessly. Secrets, she reminded herself, had a way of pressing against the walls until they could no longer be contained. Outside, the stranger had become more visible to the townsfolk. He had secured a room at the inn, but he wandered the streets, observing quietly, his dark eyes scanning each passerby with measured patience. Unlike most outsiders, he did not rush or demand attention. Instead, he seemed to glide through Redstone with an almost ghostly calm, noticing details others overlooked, the cracked windowpane in the general store, the hurried glance Clara gave when she thought no one watched, the subtle tension in Sheriff Jonah Carter's gait as he patrolled. It was not long before the stranger's attention fell squarely on Clara. She moved through the store with quiet efficiency, unaware of the eyes tracking her from across the street. He noted her hesitation as she reached for a jar of preserves, the way her fingers trembled slightly when she thought no one saw. There was a story in those small movements, a hidden weight that drew him in, compelling him to learn more. Sheriff Jonah, meanwhile, continued his careful watch. He had noticed the stranger's arrival immediately, and he did not like the unknown hovering at the edge of his town. Jonah was not a man to confront without cause, but his instincts told him to keep a close eye. Redstone had grown used to him as a steady force of law and order, but he knew better than to underestimate a newcomer, especially one who seemed so quietly intent on observing rather than participating. Inside the general store, Clara's pulse quickened as she heard the bell above the door jingle. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the stranger step inside. His hat was pulled low, but his piercing eyes found hers almost immediately. He offered a polite nod, and in that moment, a quiet tension filled the air, a sense that their meeting was no accident, though neither spoke of it aloud. "I was hoping to find a few supplies," the stranger said softly, his voice low but firm. "Perhaps you could help me." Clara nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she gathered the items. She kept her gaze mostly on the goods she carried, though she felt the weight of his scrutiny like a tangible pressure. There was something about him that unnerved her, yet at the same time, a part of her could not look away. She wondered how much he knew, if anything, about the letter she hid, or if he was simply a curious traveler drawn to the mystery she tried to conceal. Sheriff Jonah stepped onto the boardwalk just outside the store, catching sight of the stranger and Clara together. His brow furrowed. There was something in the way they looked at each other, a subtle tension that spoke of secrets and unspoken truths. Jonah's instincts told him that the story unfolding here was far from ordinary, and that the letter, the hidden burden Clara carried, was bound to intersect with this stranger sooner than anyone realized. By the time Clara returned the stranger's purchased items, the air seemed thick with unspoken questions. He thanked her with a nod, his eyes lingering on hers for just a moment too long. As she closed the door behind him, a chill ran down her spine. She could feel the pull of fate, invisible threads tightening around her, the sheriff, and this quiet stranger who had entered her life without warning. That night, as Clara sat by her fireplace, the letter remained untouched in its drawer, but she felt its presence like a living thing. Somewhere outside, the stranger's quiet steps echoed through the town, and Sheriff Jonah's watchful eyes never strayed far. The collision of secrets, suspicion, and curiosity was imminent, and Redstone would never be the same. The sun hung low over Redstone that afternoon, painting the town in muted golds and long, stretching shadows. The dusty streets were quieter than usual, most townsfolk retreating indoors to escape the heat and wind. Clara Whitmore moved carefully through the aisles of her general store, her hands busy stacking jars and boxes, though her mind was elsewhere. Every time she glanced at the bottom drawer of her desk, she felt the weight of her secret pressing down like a storm cloud ready to break. The stranger had become a presence Clara could not ignore. He wandered into the store again, unannounced, though quietly enough not to startle her. His gaze, steady and observant, followed her movements as she placed goods on shelves. There was a subtle insistence in his attention, a sense that he knew something was hidden here, though he offered no words beyond polite conversation. Clara could feel her heart quicken. She wondered if he sensed the letter, even if he didn't yet know its contents. Meanwhile, Sheriff Jonah Carter's instincts would not allow him to ignore the tension between Clara and the stranger. He had been passing by the store, ostensibly checking the streets, when he noticed their interactions. Something about their measured movements, their quiet glances, told him more than any conversation could. Jonah had long learned that the smallest gestures often revealed the deepest truths. And now, all signs pointed to Clara hiding something significant. Clara excused herself, ostensibly to retrieve more supplies from the back room, but in reality, she felt the pull of the letter. She opened the drawer just enough to glance at the envelope, her fingers brushing its surface. The wax seal glinted in the dim light, and she hesitated. Her father's words echoed in her mind. The truth may frighten you, but it will always find its way. Suddenly, the store door creaked open, and Jonah's shadow fell across the floorboards. Clara's hand froze mid-motion. "Morning, Sheriff," she said, trying to sound casual, though her voice betrayed a tremor. Jonah nodded, his eyes sweeping over the room. "I was just checking on things," he said slowly, almost conversationally, though his gaze lingered longer than usual. There was a sharpness there, an unspoken question that Clara could not answer. Her pulse quickened. She knew that one wrong move, even the slightest hint of nervousness, could draw his attention directly to the letter. As if on cue, the stranger stepped closer to the counter, placing his hand lightly on a jar of coffee. "Seems this town has a lot of history," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving Clara. "Sometimes more than the eye can see." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The stranger's words, though casual, carried an edge of knowing. He was probing, testing, and the feeling of being observed made her uneasy. She quickly returned to the shelves, her hands trembling slightly, arranging goods as if their placement could shield her secret from both the sheriff and the stranger. Jonah's gaze shifted between the two of them. Something was happening here, something subtle but undeniable. He had learned to trust his instincts, and every fiber of his being told him that the letter, that hidden truth Clara guarded, was closer to exposure than she realized. By late afternoon, the store had emptied, and Clara exhaled a long, quiet sigh. The letter remained untouched, yet the danger of discovery loomed larger than ever. The sheriff's watchful presence, combined with the stranger's quiet insistence, created a tension that Clara could no longer ignore. She knew that soon, very soon, the moment would arrive when the letter could no longer remain hidden. That night, as Clara sat by her small fire, the envelope before her, she felt the invisible threads tightening. The sheriff's suspicion, the stranger's curiosity, and her own fear combined into a force she could not resist. The storm was approaching, and when it broke, everything in Redstone would change forever. The following morning, Redstone awoke under a sky streaked with pale gray clouds, the wind carrying a faint chill that hinted at the coming winter. Sheriff Jonah Carter walked the streets with a purpose sharper than usual, his boots echoing against the wooden sidewalks. He had spent the previous evening thinking over the interactions between Clara Whitmore and the mysterious stranger. Something about them didn't sit right, and his instincts, honed through years of observing hidden truths, told him that a secret was festering beneath the surface of the quiet town. Jonah's first stop was the general store. He entered, tipping his hat politely to Clara, who looked up from arranging tins of coffee with a nervous smile. Her heart quickened as he approached the counter. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to ask you a few questions about some deliveries that have gone missing over the past week." Nothing serious, just want to get to the bottom of it. Clara nodded, trying to keep her composure. Of course, Sheriff. I haven't noticed anything out of the ordinary, but I'll help however I can. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on dusting the counter. Yet she could feel the weight of his eyes, as though he could see past her careful act of calm. Jonah's gaze drifted briefly toward the corner of the store, where the bottom drawer of her desk remained closed. His instincts screamed at him. There was something important hidden there. He was not one to jump to conclusions, but his years in law enforcement had taught him that secrets, when hidden so carefully, were rarely harmless. Meanwhile, outside, the stranger leaned against the post of the inn, observing quietly. He had learned enough from his brief encounters with Clara to know she carried a burden, though its nature remained elusive. He was patient, willing to let time reveal the truth, yet every step of the sheriff seemed to accelerate the inevitable collision of events. Jonah returned to the streets after his questioning, the gears in his mind turning. Something about Clara's hesitation, the subtle tremor in her hands, and the stranger's presence convinced him that there was more than met the eye. He made a decision. He would watch carefully, and when the moment presented itself, he would intervene, not out of suspicion alone, but out of a sense of duty. Clara, unaware of the depth of the sheriff's suspicions, retreated to her cabin once the store quieted. She opened the drawer for just a moment, the letter sitting there like a coiled snake ready to strike. Her father's words echoed again in her mind. The truth may frighten you, but it will always find its way. She clenched her fists, resisting the urge to read it once more. As the afternoon wore on, the stranger appeared at the general store again. This time, his approach was more direct. Clara, he said quietly, I don't mean to intrude, but I know you're carrying something important. Clara's eyes widened slightly, and her hand instinctively brushed against the edge of the drawer. I don't know what you mean, she murmured, though her voice lacked conviction. The stranger's gaze softened, though it remained intense. I only mean that the burden you carry doesn't have to remain yours alone. Some truths are too heavy to bear in silence. At that precise moment, Sheriff Jonah appeared at the door of the store, tipping his hat but letting his eyes sweep over Clara and the stranger. He felt the tension immediately. Something significant was happening, a hidden thread of the past threatening to unravel in the present. He took a careful step inside, his hand resting lightly on the grip of his revolver, not in threat, but in readiness. Clara felt trapped, caught between the stranger's quiet understanding and the sheriff's penetrating scrutiny. She knew that soon, very soon, she would have to confront the letter and the truth it contained. The storm that had been building in Redstone was about to break, and when it did, there would be no turning back. The evening settled over Redstone like a heavy quilt, tinged with the orange glow of the setting sun. Clara Whitmore sat in her cabin, hands trembling slightly as she stared at the sealed envelope. The letter had been hidden for so long, yet the weight of its presence had grown impossible to ignore. Outside, the wind whispered through the wooden shutters, carrying a sense of urgency that mirrored the pounding of her heart. Suddenly, a knock echoed through her cabin. Clara jumped, clutching the envelope instinctively. She opened the door a crack and found Sheriff Jonah Carter standing there, his expression calm but firm. Evening, Clara, he said quietly. I hope I'm not intruding, but I need to speak with you. Clara's throat tightened. Sheriff, I'll be brief, Jonah interrupted, though his eyes were unwavering. Something's going on in this town. I've noticed it, and I intend to get to the bottom of it. Before she could respond, the door swung open wider behind him. The stranger, who had been lingering outside, stepped in, his presence quiet yet commanding. Clara, he said softly, I only want to help. I know there's a burden you've been carrying. The longer it remains hidden, the greater the danger. Clara felt the walls closing in. She clutched the envelope to her chest. I can't, you don't understand. If this gets out. Jonah's gaze softened slightly. Then let me help. I've seen more than you think, Clara. Secrets like this. They have a way of consuming the one who carries them. You don't have to bear it alone. The stranger nodded. It's true. Some truths are too heavy to bear in silence. But hiding them only makes the consequences worse. With a trembling hand, Clara finally placed the letter on the table. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. It's my father's. He said it could change everything, about this town, about certain people. Jonah took a careful step forward, his eyes scanning the envelope. May I? he asked gently. Clara hesitated, then nodded. The sheriff lifted the letter, breaking the wax seal with practiced hands. As he unfolded the paper, the contents revealed themselves. A web of truths, hidden transactions, and secrets that implicated some of Redstone's most prominent families. The stranger leaned closer, reading silently over Jonah's shoulder. His expression darkened slightly, but he remained composed. Clara watched them anxiously, her pulse racing. This moment had been inevitable, yet now that it was here, the weight of the revelation was suffocating. Jonah set the letter down carefully. Clara, he said, his voice low but firm, this is serious. These truths could change Redstone forever. We have to handle it wisely. The stranger spoke next, his voice calm yet insistent. There's more at stake than just the town. This letter, it could put people in danger if it falls into the wrong hands. Clara swallowed hard. I didn't know who to trust, she admitted. I was afraid. Jonah nodded, understanding but resolute. Fear can keep secrets locked away, but it also keeps you from protecting those you care about. That stops now. The three of them sat in tense silence, the letter between them, its contents heavy with potential consequences. Outside, the wind moaned through the streets of Redstone, carrying with it the promise of change, of conflict, and perhaps, if they were careful, of justice. Clara finally exhaled, a mixture of relief and dread washing over her. The secret had been revealed, but the real challenge was only beginning. Sheriff Jonah Carter and the stranger would have to work with her to navigate the dangers that now threatened Redstone, dangers born not from the wind or the dust, but from the truths that had been hidden too long. And as the shadows deepened across the cabin walls, Clara realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, Redstone awoke to an uneasy silence. Word had begun to spread, though slowly, cautiously, that something significant had come to light. The letter Clara Whitmore had kept hidden was no longer a secret, and the repercussions began to ripple through the town. Sheriff Jonah Carter walked the streets with a purposeful stride, the envelope secured in his coat pocket. He knew the information it contained could unsettle families, spark feuds, and even provoke violence if handled carelessly. Clara, meanwhile, stayed in her cabin, her heart heavy. She had trusted Jonah and the stranger, but the thought of her father's revelations stirring the quiet town terrified her. Redstone had been built on polite facades, and the truth had a way of tearing facades apart. She paced the floor, wringing her hands, uncertain of what would happen next. At the general store, the stranger had taken a position near the window, watching the town's reactions. Unlike the sheriff, he did not immediately intervene. He believed in letting events unfold naturally to reveal people's true characters. His eyes, however, missed nothing. The whispered conversations, the hurried glances between townsfolk, the tension crackling in the air like static. He knew that Redstone was on the edge of change, and he also knew that Clara's secret, now revealed, was the spark that had ignited it. Sheriff Jonah began making discreet inquiries. He visited families implicated in the letter's revelations, asking questions carefully, observing reactions, and taking mental notes of any inconsistencies. The tension in the town was palpable. Some families denied involvement, others grew defensive, and a few tried to manipulate the sheriff into secrecy. Jonah, however, remained steady, a pillar of calm determination in the growing storm. Clara felt the walls closing in. Every knock at her cabin door, every passing glance in the street, sent a jolt of fear through her. Yet she also felt a strange sense of relief. The secret that had burdened her for so long was now shared, and that made the danger feel more tangible, more real, and somehow, more manageable. She knew that with the sheriff and the stranger standing by her, she was not entirely alone. Outside, the stranger finally made his move. He approached one of the families mentioned in the letter, speaking in low tones and carrying himself with quiet authority. He did not threaten, but his words had weight. The family listened, uneasy and uncertain, realizing that the hidden truths could no longer be ignored. The stranger's presence, calm yet commanding, had an effect. People began to understand that the consequences of the letter's revelations would reach everyone if they did not act wisely. By midday, the town's atmosphere had shifted. Conversations had grown quieter, cautious. People no longer laughed freely in the streets. The sheriff continued to move among them, his watchful eyes ensuring that tensions did not spiral into violence. Clara remained in her cabin, anxiously observing the reactions from her window. She had feared this moment for so long, yet it was here, unavoidable and irrevocable. That evening, Jonah returned to Clara's cabin. "You did the right thing," he said quietly, his tone firm but reassuring. "Keeping secrets might have protected you for a time, but truth is stronger than fear. Now, we must guide it carefully." Clara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just hope we can survive it." The stranger stood near the doorway, silent but present. He had seen the town's reactions and knew that the coming days would test everyone, especially Clara. The revelations had begun, and Redstone would never be the same. The balance of trust, fear, and justice had shifted, and every decision from this point forward carried weighty consequences. As night fell, Clara lit a small candle by the window, watching the flickering shadows dance across the dusty streets. Outside, Redstone slept uneasily, its quiet disrupted by whispers, suspicions, and the restless uncertainty of a town learning truths it had long avoided. The following day, Redstone's tension reached a fever pitch. Word of the letter had spread to nearly every corner of the town, and the streets buzzed with whispered conversations, suspicion, and anxiety. Sheriff Jonah Carter moved through the town deliberately, his presence a steadying force amid the rising unrest. He knew that if the wrong words were spoken or the wrong action taken, tempers could flare, and the fragile peace of Redstone could shatter. Clara Whitmore remained in her cabin, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. The revelations in her father's letter were no longer just secrets, they were catalysts for action, and the town's future and safety rested in her hands. She stared at the envelope, now empty of secrecy, realizing that the truth she had hidden had begun a chain reaction she could no longer control. The stranger approached the cabin, his boots crunching softly on the dirt outside. Unlike the townsfolk, he moved with purpose and calm, his presence both reassuring and commanding. "Clara," he said gently, "you've done what you had to do. The rest is up to us, to guide this safely, without allowing fear or anger to take control." Sheriff Jonah appeared at the cabin's door just behind him, his eyes narrowing with focus. "We need to confront those implicated in the letter, carefully and firmly," he said. "Redstone must understand the consequences of hidden actions, and they must see that justice will be fair, not vengeful." Together, the three stepped into the streets, a small but determined trio against a town suddenly aware of its buried truths. They first visited the families mentioned in the letter, beginning with the most influential. Jonah spoke firmly yet calmly, reminding the townsfolk that secrecy could no longer protect them. The stranger, observing the reactions, added his measured words, emphasizing fairness and the need to face reality rather than fear it. Some listened, humbled by the truth and ready to make amends. Others resisted, their pride and fear of exposure creating tension, but the combined presence of the sheriff and the stranger lent authority that no one dared defy openly. Clara remained quiet at first, but as the day wore on, she found her voice. She spoke with honesty and courage, explaining that hiding the truth had only prolonged danger and fear, and that now, together, they could navigate a safer path forward. By late afternoon, the town began to calm. Families who had resisted initially softened, realizing that the revelations were not meant to punish, but to correct wrongs and prevent further harm. Jonah's steady guidance and the stranger's quiet authority kept tempers in check, while Clara's heartfelt words reminded everyone of the human cost of secrecy. As the sun dipped behind the western cliffs, casting long shadows over Redstone, Clara finally felt a measure of relief. The letter had caused upheaval, yes, but it had also brought clarity, accountability, and a renewed sense of community. People had been forced to confront the truth, but now they could move forward with understanding and, perhaps, forgiveness. Sheriff Jonah placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "You were brave," he said softly. "It wasn't easy to carry that burden alone, and it wasn't easy to reveal it. But you did what had to be done." The stranger nodded in agreement. "The truth can be heavy, Clara, but it can also bring people together. Today, you carried both fear and hope, and you've helped Redstone find balance." Clara looked at both of them, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of relief, not just for herself, but for the town she had come to call home. The storm of secrecy had passed, leaving the possibility of healing in its wake. Redstone, though changed, would endure. And Clara, with the sheriff and the stranger beside her, knew that whatever came next, she would no longer face it alone. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting Redstone in soft shades of gold and amber. The town was quiet, the dust settling after a long night of unrest and whispered reckonings. Clara Whitmore stood on the wooden porch of her cabin, the morning wind tugging gently at her hair. For the first time in years, she felt the heavy weight on her shoulders lighten. The letter that had haunted her for so long had finally been revealed, and with it, the truth had begun to heal rather than harm. Sheriff Jonah Carter approached, his boots steady on the creaking boards. He tipped his hat, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Morning, Clara," he said, his voice calm but warm. "The town seems quieter today. More aware. I think your honesty has given them a chance to reset, to see things clearly." Clara nodded, a soft smile breaking through her weariness. "It feels like a fresh start," she admitted, her hazel eyes reflecting the morning light. "I was so afraid of what might happen, of what could go wrong, but now, it feels like something good can come from it." From the shadows near the edge of the porch, the stranger emerged, his movements as quiet and deliberate as ever. He regarded Clara with an expression that combined respect and quiet admiration. "You carried a heavy burden, Clara," he said softly. "But you did not let it break you. That strength, it will guide you forward." Jonah and the stranger exchanged a glance, two men who had been cautious yet steadfast throughout the recent turmoil. Both understood that Clara's courage had been the catalyst for Redstone's survival and growth. The town had faced its secrets, confronted its fears, and now had the chance to rebuild with honesty as its foundation. Clara took a deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill her lungs. The streets of Redstone were slowly coming to life. Shopkeepers opening their doors, children laughing as they ran between buildings, neighbors greeting each other with a tentative warmth. The tension that had gripped the town for so long was easing, replaced by a fragile but promising sense of community. Sheriff Jonah spoke again, his tone thoughtful. "Clara, you've changed more than just the town. You've changed how we all see each other. Secrets don't have to divide us. They can remind us of our responsibilities and our capacity to forgive." The stranger nodded. "The future is uncertain," he said, "but with honesty and courage, it becomes something worth shaping. Redstone has a chance now, thanks to you." Clara's gaze softened as she looked between the sheriff and the stranger. She had faced fear, doubt, and isolation, yet she had emerged stronger, and she knew that she was not alone. The two men had become her allies, their presence a reminder that trust, even when it was difficult, could form bonds stronger than fear or secrecy. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that slowly retreated, Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The storm of secrets and revelations had passed, leaving behind not just scars, but lessons and hope. Redstone had survived, and so had she. The town would continue to grow, people would continue to learn, and Clara would continue to live with the courage she had discovered in herself. Sheriff Jonah Carter and the stranger remained at her side, reminders that even in the harshest frontier, trust, honesty, and bravery could forge a path toward a brighter tomorrow. And so, as the wind swept gently through the streets of Redstone, carrying dust and whispers alike, a new chapter began. One of hope, redemption, and the quiet knowledge that even the heaviest secrets, once faced, could lead to freedom, understanding, and a stronger community. Clara Whitmore stepped forward, ready to meet whatever the future might hold, with the lessons of the past guiding her every step.